Welcome back to another episode of the Future Lab, where we're talking with and about technology in the state of Ohio, talking with different people that are representing so many cool companies and ideas out there. And we have another one for you today. Today, we are joined by Timm, who is the Chief Delivery Officer at Willow Tree. If you're not familiar with Willow Tree, or it's the first time maybe you've heard about it, Willow Tree helps the world's most admired brands on their path to digital leadership from product to process. Founded in 2008 as a pioneering mobile app development company, WillowTree has grown into a full service digital product consultancy, helping their clients anywhere humans and technology intersect. Their team provides end to end full stack development, strategy, design, and growth marketing services. Some of their clients, you've probably heard of them, include Domino's, HBO, Fox, National Geographic, Synchrony Financial, PepsiCo, and AB InBev. So, Jamie, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show. And I'm
Thanks for
looking
having me.
forward to having a conversation with you today. So,
Me
to
too.
start, let's hop in with tell us a little bit more about Willow Tree. I kind of just read the bio, of course, but what is the work that you all do kind of as a whole? But also, if you could talk about the presence and what is happening in Columbus specifically, because there's a pretty big footprint and investment in the team and the strategy that's happening right here in our own state.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like you said, we partner with you know big brands, both locally in Ohio, but also across the country and across the world to build digital products that help their employees and their customers achieve business critical outcomes. So it looks a lot of different ways depending on the industry, but it's been a really exciting couple of years, particularly in Columbus, because Ohio's home to some really great companies. Over the last 2 years, we've had some really great partnership with the state to continue to fuel the growth that we've had here. I think we have something like 200 positions open across the company, and a significant number of those here in Columbus. And so we're hiring engineers, we're hiring product leaders, we're hiring designers, lots of folks across the software development lifecycle to build a great team here in Columbus and beyond.
Yeah, that's a great overview. And if you could, what about your role specifically as the chief delivery officer? Excuse me. What does that mean? What does that entail? What does a day to day, which I'm sure is very different, but in the life of you look like?
Yeah. So I support our delivery teams that serve our clients. And so that could look like partnering client side to better understand the business challenges and opportunities that are in front of them. For example, a lot of our clients right now are looking at a similar problem or opportunity to what I just shared with our business, which is capacity building. How do they grow their teams quickly enough to respond to this the rapid digitization that's happening based on what we've all been through over the last 2 or so years with COVID. And, that's a really consistent theme that I hear from our clients. How do we help serve them in building products, but also how do we work together to do capability building in addition to the capacity building so that, there's great retention of teams, that great products are able to not just be built, but to evolve and serve their customers. And so conversations like that are a big part of the way that I spend my day. I also spend a good bit of my time supporting our internal teams, looking at practices that we need to develop or evolve based on what we're seeing in the space, and coaching and working closely with our teams on the ground to make sure that they have what they need to help our customers.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned kind of helping folks see what they're seeing, kind of emerging. I'm sure trends, kind of staying at the forefront. And as I read off some of the names that you all have worked with,
Yeah.
Domino's, HBO, Fox, National Geographic, PepsiCo. Those are household brand leading names that are out there every single day. Kind of innovating within the company itself, but certainly pushing new content, new information out there to market themselves as well. But what are you seeing kind of in your work that we're at the beginning of a new year? The calendar just turned to 2022. But what are some of the trends that you all are seeing as a company, or maybe that you've been passionate to follow in your space that some of these leading brands are thinking about or should be?
Yeah, even before we talk about the technology that they use and offer to their customers, one of the things that I think everybody is working through right now is how do they best serve their workforce. Many folks are either in a hybrid scenario or remote scenario, or they have folks that their job necessitates being in a facility. And I think a lot of conversation is, how do we offer the best employee experience given those circumstances that optimizes for the type of space that's most appropriate. And we've been through the same thing over the
Yeah.
last couple of years. We're we've been experimenting with what I would call two different styles of work. One is work from anywhere, where the
Mhm.
office is a retreat where folks come together maybe a couple of times a year for collaboration, but otherwise work remotely across the country. And the other is a work from near environment that really optimizes for the office as a clubhouse for points of collaboration, for mentorship, to see folks face to face on a cadence that makes the most sense. And I think that's something that, from a technology and a working standpoint, that a lot of folks are looking at. And one of the things that I think's most exciting about mixed reality and a lot of the innovation that's happening there right now, I think has some really great application for most folks that do office work.
Yeah. And you talked about kind of this balance and the different models now of
Yeah,
workforces and how teams are. Your company, WillowTree itself, has you said you're hiring, but there's also kind of this remote balance. So as you all have been designing this future of work, which COVID over the past, coming up on 2 years, has really redefined and reshaped. What has that meant to you all, and what has that kind of opened up when in terms of new talent that you're recruiting? Certainly Columbus, where we're at, is this kind of booming tech hub. We're
yeah.
kind of on the up, but there's other cities where you have major anchors. But at the same time, you have teammates that are all over doing amazingly innovative work. So how has that been, within your own company and experience?
Yeah, I think it's allowed for the best of both worlds, really. The opportunity for, work from anywhere or a remote first, I think has given us access to additional pools of talent and even niche skill sets that may not be available in every market that we traditionally operated in. But I think it's also shown us that the markets that we do operate in, where um, cost of living and quality of life is really high, has become more important to all folks in the workforce, I think, than even 2 years ago. And so making sure that that's kind of forefront in the way that we think about providing a great employee experience, I think is really important. And that, that provides great flow through value for our clients, right? They want consistency and the folks they work with on our team. They want folks that are fresh and that have time to be innovative and bring great thinking to the table. And, so making sure that we have great environments for our team, think enables us to do our best work for our clients too, which has been really important. And it's been a funny 2 years to kind of tinker with that, right? Safety has
Yeah.
been top of mind for us throughout. And so we've been projecting forward, what these two styles could look like, while still providing an environment for our teams where there's choice and safety is first and foremost in terms of how we've been thinking about that. So we've been experimenting with these two styles, but I think we'll continue to do that too. I think we've learned a
Mhm.
lot over the last 2 years about collaboration and how technology can facilitate that, but I don't think that learning's done yet. I think we'll continue to learn what works best, and have lots of opportunity to innovate with what the technology that's available now allows us to do. Even from the basics of how things like Zoom have evolved in the last
Yeah.
2 years. I think about what that experience was like on day one versus now, to what Meta and folks are looking at in terms of mixed reality and augmented reality and things like that. I think the next year is going to be high innovation around
Yeah.
workplace technology for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the pandemic isn't new, but we've seen these waves, and a lot of companies, trying to go 100% back in, by around this time was kind of marked, but then
Yeah,
this new wave change of plans. But I think what we've seen, and to your point, the smart companies, the ones that are recruiting top talent and having a workplace that people want to, go to, and not just in person, but just want to show up to every day. You can kind of tell where I think a lot of businesses have struggled, and tech first or kind of innovate digitally focused companies, I think, have been able to get it a lot better and quicker, because that's just probably by nature, where digital and working online, and just some of all that goes into it is certainly part of it. But I want to dig into a little bit about kind of your history and your
Yeah.
path, both before Willow Tree and then since you've been there. You have an interesting bio, and I'd love if you can kind of, share from where you grew up, where you're originally from, but then walk us a bit, through your career trajectory arc, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So I'm originally from Northeast Ohio, like we were talking about before the show, from around the Wadsworth area. Um, and when I graduated from high school, I went to school at Ohio Northern. So I am the Ohio poster child in terms of my professional career, I think, for sure. And I had, a really awesome program for what I thought was going to be the field of practice that I had, which was in public relations. And I had an emphasis on organizational communications and some interest in crisis communication. And I had a fantastic professor that allowed me to fuel my curiosity with an independent study around how technology was really changing the field of communication. And through that independent study, kind of found my passion for tech. Um, and my first internship, well, not my first, but my last internship that I had in school, became the place for my first job, which was at Bob Evans' corporate office. And my manager there, which is still a mentor and a woman that I look up to tremendously today, really gave me the opportunity to, to stoke that passion and to think about how new media and technology can change communication. And so I worked really closely with the CEO that came in, the first external CEO to the brand, around his introduction to the company through an internal blog, which allowed us to bring him to every member of the field, whether it was production plants or restaurants. And I learned so much from Steve about leadership and about how to stay close to your customers and how to really serve your employees. Those lessons I carried forward and continued that love of technology. And from there, I worked for the Columbus Chamber of Commerce and the Regional Economic Development Organization, which now is led by Kenny McDonald here in Columbus. And it has been under many names, Columbus 2020, and in partnership with the partnership itself to really fuel economic development. And that was really interesting and allowed me to really understand the business value of a lot of different organizations and how they work together to really support the region and create great opportunity and to help fuel innovation. And so my time there was really wonderful. One of the things that I did there was I participated in Startup Weekend. And Startup Weekend is an organization that's a nonprofit, and it happens all over the country, but people get together for a weekend and they try and start a company. And it brings engineers and business people and venture and angel investors together. And I met a lot of people while I was at that event that I still keep in touch with today. But two of them ended up being the founders of Dynamit Technologies, which was the beginning of the Columbus office of Willow Tree. And so I joined Dynamit back in, I think, 2010. And I was one of the first client-facing folks that they brought on, and I helped build the project management and account management practice in that office. And several years later, we went from 7 people to a bit over 100, and joined Willow Tree and became the Columbus office for what is now almost 1,000-person consultancy. Wow. From a digital product standpoint. So it's been a ton of fun. I've had the opportunity to learn and interact with so many different folks locally, but also nationally through our client base that have really provided a continuous fire hose of learning and curiosity and challenge, which has been amazing.
Yeah, that's incredible. And thank you for sharing, because I kind of cheated in looking at your background. We have a lot of similarities with, I was also kind of a communications media person that started to have exposure to working on tech focused projects. And that was really the catalyst for me, is sounds like you within some of your studies had that, of kind of seeing the melding of those two worlds, and and then just kind of running with it, which is a lot of fun. And then also, being at the Columbus Chamber, we're a similarly organized organization to
Yeah.
Ohio X, but statewide. And so it's very cool to talk with someone that has a lot of those same themes to them. But as you walked through, you've worked at large Columbus, leaders that are kind of historically known as, part of the Columbus corporate community. You've been at places like the Chamber. You have, tech startup experience, and now you're at growing, scaling companies. You've had a front row seat with a lot of others, but a front row seat to kind of the growth of this Columbus tech
Yeah.
hub that's been built up. And we still have a long way to go, but I think it's a really exciting point. And as I had previously mentioned to you, one of the cool things about this podcast, I think, is it's Ohio based. So we get people from Cleveland and Cincinnati, and oftentimes, they'll ask, and it goes both ways, of course, of, what has happened in Columbus? Like, how has it happened? What are those keys to the success? And then likewise, we also have people that listen in from, places maybe like New York City or San Francisco. They grew up here or went to college here before leaving for a job. And at some point might want to come back and live and work in Ohio.
Yeah.
But could you, from your perspective, your experience, talk a little bit about what the past, 10, 15 years have been like for that growth of the Columbus tech ecosystem,
Yeah.
and, maybe some keys that you've seen along the way?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of aspects that really make Columbus and Ohio a special place from a technology standpoint and from an innovation standpoint. One is just the sheer number of higher education institutions that are in the state and in particular in Columbus. I think the corporate and community partnerships that are forged with those organizations is really critical. So one of the things that stands out from my memory at the chamber was the connection to the Workforce Development Council, particularly Columbus State, around what do companies need from a skill set standpoint, and how do we build programs that create that workforce or help transform that workforce, whether that's young people from high school or college, or that's folks returning to the workplace or looking to change careers later on. I think that partnership is really critical for creating an environment that has the talent to allow a company to grow and to scale rapidly and to pull in the talent that they need. I think having places like Battelle and other innovation hubs locally is a huge component to the vibe and the buzz around the city. If you look at the history of the great innovations that have come from Battelle, it's incredible to know that that's in the backyard. And I think those components are huge, but I also think there's this bit around the lack of ego in the Midwest that makes collaboration really natural, where folks want to help each other and they see someone in a circumstance that perhaps they've been, or an idea, and they're game to help or make that connection. And I think that goes a long way to helping, somebody get started or helping take a company from this step to the next step. That's really special about the community.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been an exciting past decade or so, and I can only imagine the opportunities that we're going to all see come out of the growth of Columbus and Ohio and places in the Midwest that historically haven't been thought of in the same breath as a San Francisco Bay Area or New
Yeah, the
York or
funding,
Boston or Seattle.
the
Yeah,
funding that's
absolutely.
happened over the last couple of years, and folks that have, put down roots here,
Yeah,
folks like Drive Capital and others that have invested a lot locally. I think that makes a huge difference for the growth that we're seeing too. Number of
it does.
unicorn companies coming out of Central Ohio alone, I think, is an interesting data point to that end too.
It certainly is, and there's so much there that we could dig into, but for sake of keeping on your schedule and time, we'll go into kind of the second portion of
Yeah,
our podcast where we ask all of our guests the same four questions. But what's fun is we get to hear different perspectives. Someone, from Columbus, someone from Cleveland or Dayton or Toledo that do, that work for a tech company, or maybe they're a university researcher or a venture capitalist. The answers don't necessarily have to be quick, but they're just kind of a fun way to kind of hear what's happening. But our first one is, what is a challenge that you're working to solve? So this could be the big macro level of what you're doing day in and day out at Willow Tree, or it could be something really, really small and kind of niche that you've been kind of working on as a leader or an executive. No right or wrong answers, big or small, but what is a challenge you've been working to solve lately?
Yeah, so I guess it'll fit into the bigger baby perennial kind of challenge, but you know, as we continue to scale, maintaining that innovative culture, that team of teams culture that I think is really, a core part of the way that WillowTree's been able to evolve and serve our clients as technology changes and people bring in great ideas. With the consistency and the stability that a big company offers, at 1,000 consultants and partners for our clients. Bringing the best of both of those things, I think, is the challenge that's in front of me, and I think we're doing a pretty great job of making that happen. But that's the work that you never put down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a great answer based on the last part of the conversation with, what's that Columbus kind of opportunity and the challenge of the growth? It's that where there's going to be all these companies, going through similar things. So it's good to have, leaders that are, actively in the middle of it and have been at it for helping that next wave get up. So love
Sure.
that answer. But question number two is, what is a favorite read, listen, or watch? So this could be a book, a podcast, a show that either you're geeking out to for work or it's your guilty pleasure.
Yeah, so IdeaCast from HBR, I think, is definitely something that I love. I also do a lot of popping around. We have this service at WillowTree called Blinkist, and it allows you to do a 15-minute read on a number of different books, whether it's a business book or um, a certain type of fiction. And so it's a good way to refresh, maybe a book that you read 10 years ago, like Good to Great by Jim Collins, or, read something that's newer, like A Humanocracy. And I like to read a lot, but the challenge of the front to back read with podcasts and articles and then everything else, Blinkist allows you to do a little bit of both of those things. And it's not a sponsored ad by any means, but it's definitely been an awesome tool that we've brought to the team this past year.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's some of the innovations in kind of that space, the education or whatever we want to call it is pretty cool. And yeah, one of the things this podcast we used to do it in person with folks and do it a lot longer. But then what we found was as people are commuting or not commuting these days, they didn't have that 60-minute drive each way. So we were kind of trying to make it more digestible and much like they're doing, but at a much bigger scale, of course.
Yeah.
So question number three, Jamie, is what is one problem you'd solve or a business you'd start? Willow Tree, not we'll put that aside. This is kind of a fun way to look at it. But if someone said, "Hey, here's $100 million for you to tackle something that you've just been passionate about," or it's kind of been in the back of your mind, and you also don't have to have expertise in the space either. So
Yeah.
basically, any big problem out there that you would solve.
So something that I think about a lot and actually does connect to Willow Tree is the accessibility of technology, kind of across all groups, is something that we're really passionate about, particularly for young folks. In each of our cities, we work really closely with partner organizations that work on creating more opportunity for historically marginalized groups to have access to technology early, to make sure that the long term of that is a more equitable representation, of all people in the workplace. And so that's definitely an area that I have a lot of passion for, and somewhere that I would spend time in the circumstance you described.
Yeah, and I think to previous comments you had mentioned of, groups like Columbus State and others in kind of that workforce world and how the business and education communities in the state, especially Columbus, work well together. I think
Yeah,
that's one of those creating opportunities for all Ohioans
yeah,
is completely vital because even with the growth, especially of the city that we both happen to be in, Ohio's kind of population trends aren't as booming as maybe some southern states or some western states. But I think the real opportunity we have is to make sure there's opportunity for all Ohioans, regardless of where you went to school, or maybe the community you grew up in, or whatever that might look like. And
100%.
I think that that's a huge one. And there's, to your point, there's a lot of great groups out there working, hopefully, but there's more for all of us to do. So I love that answer.
For sure.
um, Question number 4 is, what's your favorite place in Ohio? So, maybe COVID starts to wind down and you have family or friends come in, or some Willow Tree colleagues from elsewhere in the country come to visit. What are you going to do with them? What would you suggest they do for a weekend?
Yeah. So we've been in the downtown area as long as we've been in Columbus from a workplace standpoint. And so I love everything that's happened, from the arena district outward, which is where our offices are. And so the path down High Street, both directions, I think is definitely on that list. There's always something to do on the Scioto Mile. There's great food in both directions, depending on how long they're here. Taking them up to campus for a game or to experience what Ohio State's like is definitely on the list. But for family and friends, one of the things that our family loves to do is get out and hike, and there are a lot of great opportunities, I think, to do that at all the metro parks too. So
Yeah.
that's definitely on the list.
Yeah, it's all great answers, and I love the same too. The energy and kind of the connectivity of the short north being built out over the past, however many years, has been really cool. Especially, and I worked downtown for a long time, and I know it, hasn't had the historical kind of scale of maybe some other downtowns, even in the Midwest, but uh, that's been, being built up, which is fun to see. Well, Jamie, this has been great. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining
thanks,
us. Thanks for
Chris.
sharing about your work at Willow Tree. Anything we didn't cover, or anything you want to plug, websites, how to find more information about the company, yourself, whatever that might be?
Yeah, I would definitely share our website, which is willowtreeapps.com. You can check out all of our open opportunities right now. Would love to talk to you if you have experience in the tech or consulting fields for sure.
Great. Well, we'll link that in the show notes. So for those watching or listening, you can just scroll on down, check out all the different career opportunities. As Jamie mentioned, they are hiring, and we've seen and share a lot of the jobs that they're posting out there, and they're great opportunities, and a great way to get involved with the tech sector. If you're from outside of the state, come on home, or some opportunities for those that are already here, for sure, to find a new career opportunity. So thanks again for watching and listening. And Jamie, thank you so much for being here and sharing some of your and the Willow Tree story. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. My pleasure.